before we get to the video, if you live in the United States, please go to this website, type in your zip code, and click enter. This is how you can contact one of your congresspeople. I just selected the top one because they were at the top. And they'll have a page, and there's a contact information. If you've heard about the COPPA compliance with YouTube, this is a significant problem for channels such as mine, which have a general audience. I do scientific content. Part of science is having that discourse about just how to improve, how to learn, and without the comment sections on videos like mine, we'd be in serious trouble. So here's what the forum looks like. You can contact them, tell them how COPPA is going to cause problems with YouTube, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, do some research, and thank you so much for your help. Now we're on to the video. So hello random viewers, and welcome to whatever episode this is of our government controlled. As per your request, we need to get more science around Kerbal. So this is our airplane from last time. We're taking it to the Badlands. That's the last biome that we need to get to. It's about halfway around the planet, so this is the longest flight we've ever done in this plane. And of course, it's pretty standard takeoff. It's not standard landings, though. The Badlands get that name for a reason. The terrain is very rough, and for whatever reason, the friction was really high, so it was quite hard to land. Cruising at night was pretty nice. As we get over it, we begin to see just how bad the terrain is. It's very, very rough. And you can see I'm struggling to land, but it's just difficult, and you lose control very easily. There were a lot of crashes like that. But finally I got one that didn't cause the entire airplane to explode, only part of it. So there we lost one wheel. We got the science, took off, and lost another wheel. So now we were down to 3 out of the 5 tires. Still technically enough. We have a rough landing back at the Kerbal Space Center after the long flight back. You can see we really only burned through less than half of our fuel, so this plane has more than enough fuel to fly all the way around the planet, which is a waste, so in later versions I drain it. We then use this device that is very prone to self-destructing as it lands hard to gather science from the rooftops. As our president very kindly suggested, the rooftops do have science of their own, so we land on the tracking station, then we check out the flagpole, and we get all this data that we haven't gotten before. And then we proceed to go to the moon to get that last little bit that we need to get batteries. Batteries give us a means of storing electricity, that way we can go farther. Anyways, standard rocket, same as before. This is the Athalio 1 still. Slight tweaks, we've given it wheels instead of struts, that way it has less drag. Besides that, it was a very standard launch and travel over to the moon. You can see we get a nice high apoapsis. This second stage yet again runs out of fuel while still in orbit around Kerbal, which means that we are leaving orbital debris, which we will have to retrieve at some point. Once we get to the moon, we use these nice fancy maneuver nodes, which we got from updating the tracking station and mission control. And this allows us to fine-tune our maneuvers much more. You can see landing is quite difficult with these wheels. They are a little more bouncy than the struts and have less of a base, so we just had to keep trying different spots till we found one where we did not fall over. Once we did, we stayed there, planted a flag, as we always do. This is Valentina's first time on the moon, I do believe. And then she checked out some other areas, got all the science that we need, and then proceeded to head back to Kerbal with all that data. As you will see later, this new technology doesn't just give us a way of storing electricity for our life support systems, it also gives us a probe core so that we can do unmanned missions, which we will do here at the end. And then on top of that, it gives us the Science Junior, which is another means of gathering scientific information, which is very good because we need as many instruments as possible. The re-entry is pretty good, things exploding of course. Valentina decides to jump out of her cockpit and proceed on her own parachute just for some extra entertainment. Get some nice flips in it too before her parachute does open. Landing is not so great though, she does faceplant. We're having to work on that. Here's that technology. This allows for a lot of new things, such as this airplane with that Science Junior instrument mentioned before. It has 2 of them. We're going to take it over to 2 biomes near Kerbal, the highlands and mountains. This plane has straight wings, as you can see. This gives us a better climb rate, but it means we have a slower top speed. It also only has 2 engines. It really doesn't need 3 because it weighs quite a bit less than the other version of the airplane. Even with those wings, it still does fly very fast. That thrust-to-weight ratio helps. Landing at the highlands was terrible, but survivable, and that's all that matters in this case. Paint doesn't really get scratched in the game. We take off again. You can see this thing has some serious flaps that come down to about 30 degrees. That allows us to land at pretty close to full engine power, and that gives us a much higher margin of safety. We don't have to wait for those engines to spool up. They're already at near full power. This is the same way that commercial airliners land, and why flaps are so helpful for them. It allows them to come in with those high power settings so that it go around as possible. On landing on this mountaintop, you can see that we're using both sets of flaps, all deployed at 30 degrees. It really allows us to come in very slow and touch down very gently on the mountaintop. At least in theory, assuming my piloting skills in Kerbal are decent, which they are not exactly. Same thing as the Highlands, this is a very terrible landing. It kind of side skids. That's common with a tail dragger. That is the other advantage. A tail dragger allows for more rough terrain. But after getting the Science Junior report from there, we managed to take off and not slam back into the mountain face. Yep, there's a nice climb. And then head on back to the Space Center to land and retrieve this very valuable information. Now this landing is exactly how it should be. A nice stabilized approach. Very gentle flare there at the end, not too much bouncing or floating. As it settles nicely to the runway, this is how I wish most of my landings were in the game and real life. In real life I tend to bounce a lot because I'm still learning how ground effect works. Trust me guys, it's very nice we don't have ground effect in Kerbal Space Program. We take off again, this time to get over to the grasslands, get some data there. More rough landings. Rough terrain is very hard to land on. Kerbin, which is the planet here in Kerbal Space Program, it's a bit more extreme in its terrain features. Earth doesn't tend to be so bumpy all over the place, and that does make things harder. Despite that though, we do manage to settle down, no undue explosions, and comes to a nice stop. We get those reports from the materials bay. Looks like our pilot's having a great time flying. Sometimes people just enjoy the bumps. Nearly hitting a tree, we don't want to be hitting those, they tend to snap wings off. Not in this game, but in real life. We then fit some floats to the plane and attempt to take off with that. That is also a problem because now we have 4 wheels spread out terribly, making it nearly impossible to get off the ground without using high speeds and flaps. Fortunately, we have both those things. And then, using them again, we get to land very gently on the water. The water is bad and can definitely rip a plane apart, so you have to be very, very gentle when doing this. After getting science from there, take off again. We're going to try to go get some science from the shore. This does not end too well though. These floats extend out a lot farther than the wheels, and it leads to explosions everywhere. I guess you guys who love explosions enjoy that. It does cost me money. Here's another vehicle for getting more reports around the Space Center with this new instrument. And then it is on to Minmus with an unmanned rocket. This is the first time we've built one that has no crew, does not have the stability assistance system, making precise maneuvers near impossible, but fortunately we do have quite a margin of error with the sheer amount of fuel that we have, and the stripped down weight of not having life support or landing gear. This is not intended to land. And thanks to some updates with our Space Center, we can save fuel in even other ways, which we will get to here in a minute. You can see we've got this stage doing quite a bit of burning, and also being left in orbit like the last one. I think that's like 4 now being left in orbit. People who don't like orbital debris will be very upset. Continuing on to the final stage, this stage does a lot of work. It's amazing how far it gets. Now just with some slight adjustments, we get a nice flyby of Minmus, and a return trajectory using the moon's orbit. We get the science there, getting very close to the small moon. It's made primarily of ice, it looks like. We'll find out when we send a crew to get some surface samples. Speaking of which, that's something that we need to do. I upgraded the R&D, that should allow for that. Here we go, flying by the moon, so that we can use its gravity to fling us back towards Kerbin, and then more adjustments, as well as even more, all of these to lose some speed for re-entry so that it doesn't burn up. I realized we have enough fuel to land this whole stage. We use drogue chutes so that we can bleed off a lot of speed, and then the main chutes, and then whatever speed is left over at the end we can use the engine to get rid of. And that should leave us with an expensive engine saved from oblivion, as well as fuel tanks, all of which will give us quite a bit of money back. We might be able to recuperate a large amount of the cost of this launch. And sure enough, we do. We get about 12,000 credits back. That's it for now. Thank you for your patience on this, and thank you in advance or post for contacting your congressmen and women about the COPPA problem that we're having. It's a good act. I agree with their mission to try to protect children from targeted ads. I get where they're coming from, but we need to make some adjustments because it's going to cause problems with YouTube fundamentally. and it's going to hinder learning, as well as some of the economics that YouTube brings for a lot of people. Don't just take my word for it, though. Do your own research. And thank you so much for watching. Please do like, comment, and subscribe. Comment while you can. Exercise your right to be represented so that we can continue to comment, so that we can continue this great series. It really is a joy to do. Thank you again, and have a great day.